Today I'm making Krepples. Now Krepples are also called ponhaus, and some people call it scrapple. What is the difference between them? Well, Krepples and ponhaus were what my family and people in the region I grew up in called them. Scrapple I only see in town people's lingo and in grocery stores. However, scrapple in the grocery store have too much liver in it to be the traditional Krepples. In fact, what I'm making today is not exactly traditional. It's as close as I can get in a modern kitchen. Traditionally, when we butchered the hog in the fall, we would take the head, the ears, the kidney, a little bit of the liver, sometimes other cuts of meat, grind them up after they're cooked, and they would look a little bit like this. This, however, is fresh sausage. It's the closest I can get to the traditional without using the actual head meat, which is what we call the meat we're going to use. We want to use cornmeal. Coarse ground cornmeal is actually the best. However, I ran out and did not get to the store, so I just got the fine ground. The only difference is the texture. It will be all right. Now what we're going to do is take 1 cup cornmeal and add it to 1 cup cold water, because if you mix cornmeal into the boiling water, it sometimes clumps and makes a not very nice Krepples. And then while that cooks, I will give you a little more about the history, but in a nutshell, we're going to cook that down into a mush, add the meat, and then we're going to pour it into a pan and let it cool. It'll have to cool several hours. We'll dump that out on a board, slice it, and then fry it. Some people deep fry it. I like to skillet fry it. It's all up to you if you ever try the recipe. If you've made it the traditional way, you may even be cooking it outdoors. Anyway, let me get to the next process, and I can give you a little bit more about the history of how we made the original recipe. It's quite interesting. I don't think there's too many people around now that actually make it the old-fashioned way. So if I tell you a little bit about the history, maybe you can get a little bit of the feel why this recipe is such a family tradition. Anyway, see you at the stove. Okay, now we're ready to cook the mush part of our Krepples. I've got the water and the cornmeal mixed. As you can see, it's rather smooth, and that's what you want when you're adding it to your water. Fortunately, when my water gets hot to the boiling temperature, it doesn't look boiling on these little heater things. I'm not sure what you actually call those. Anyway, hot plate maybe, since it's good and hot. As you notice, I'm adding it carefully and stirring as I pour that in there. And when you get to the bottom, it's kind of sludgy. Don't worry about it, just get it in there the best you can. There we go. That's good enough, right? And you can see it's not very attractive. It looks kind of like, I don't know what it looks like. You can figure it out for me. Anyway, we're going to cook and stir that now. Now you may have to adjust the temperature if it gets too vigorous. The important thing is to watch you do not get burned, because once this gets going, it is a nasty thing to want to burn you. And that's why you use a deep pot for one reason, and a wooden spoon. You may want to wear a mitt on your hand. There are many ways you can prevent burns. I'm kind of old-fashioned and often get a burn as part of the badge of glory. Anyway, we're going to cook that. Now while it's cooking, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this recipe. I mentioned before about the sausage, that it's usually head meat, and it's done on butchering day, and they're all gathered around. You invite relatives, friends, whatever. Often we have the Amish over, and we're all together there doing the butchering. And my job often was cleaning the organs, cleaning the head. I don't know why kids always get the dirty job. One of the elders were cutting up the pork, packaging it for freezing, or grinding it into sausage, whatever. The difference between the way I'm making it and them, though, is the big 50-gallon iron kettles. This is nowhere near that big, and of course you would use more cornmeal and make a larger mush. Big paddles, the whole bit. and we'd put them on a hook and suspend them from the hitching post. And under the hitching post, we'd have the fire and the kettle on there and get it boiling and cook it. Now, in one pot, we often made our Krepples. In another pot, we would take the cuts of the pork that we would consider unusable for us and cook a similar dish for the dogs. So we'd be cooking up the mush and adding in, you know, just odds and ends. And the dogs loved it. However, in our pot, of course, we would cook it like this with a big paddle, stir it over the fire while the elders would prepare the cuts. And often by the time you were done, your Krepples would be ready for the next step. Now, if you wonder why we had a hitching post, my parents farmed with horses, teams. We'd had cart horses, buggy horses, riding horses, and a team of Belgian horses. And farmed with those. We also farmed with tractors. It wasn't that we were always farming with horses, but that's kind of the way it is. And the hitching post doubled as our butchering device and our tying the horse up device. It was kind of nice because on those days of butchering, sometimes we'd all get together and have a meal. Mom would make pies. It was a fun time. It was cold out usually. You want to do your butchering in the fall or winter when the temperatures are cold enough, your meat doesn't spoil, less flies. It's just a better time. But in the modern kitchen, you know, we have to improvise. Now we're going to cook this. I got to turn it up a bit. I'm still learning how to use the little burner thing, so I may have to cut this video up to not bore you to death. I wanted to take a little time with you to tell you about the process that brings back memories for me. And now, the Amish in that area, they also call them Krepples or ponhaus. I don't know if all of them around the nation call it that, but this is your Sugar Creek, Baltic, Holmes County bunch. And we spent a lot of time with them. They were always at the farm every day. So, you know, we shared recipes. Some of the recipe ideas I got from them originally, and then kind of put my own spin on them over the years. But all in all, it's kind of nice to pass down these recipes to the next generation because there's so much history in them, and generations have survived off this food. And I also want to take a moment to show you my apron the best I can. It's really nice. And my friend Joan made this for me. It's already dirty. And my kitchen aprons don't stay pristine very long. Anyway, my friend Joan made this for me for a gift one year, and I treasure it greatly. And she's a real peach to have as a friend. And I just think she needs a shout out. Her sewing is the best. I can't sew near as good as she can, even though I've sewed for years and years and years. Ever since I was years old. I don't want to tell my age. Okay, as you can see, this is starting to keep the cornmeal suspended, so that means it's actually cooking. But to not bore you, I am going to pause the video and cook this closer to done, and then I'll show you what the next step is. But thank you for spending time with me and letting me tell you about the history of this recipe. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you make it sometime for your family. It's well worth a try, at least, to kind of keep that tradition alive. Anyway, I'll see you in a moment. Okay, we've been cooking this and stirring it. You have to stir constantly. As you can see, it's thickened up. Now, when it starts thickening up, often people say around 20 minutes. I don't know how long it takes because cornmeal, you know, sometimes it has a mind of its own. I don't think it's been quite 20 minutes, but you can see it's gotten a lot thicker. Now, you want to add your salt I used to add it at the beginning of the cooking, but then I read articles where grains and rice and all that, it's best not to add the salt. I use pink salt, by the way. Best not to add the salt until the end. I don't know the difference. I don't know if it is a difference, but I thought, well, somebody must know more than I do. So I've been adding it at the end now. And that was a teaspoon. And like I say, you may have to taste it for salt. I do know the sausage has some in, and it's always easier to add salt than to try to remove it. Anyway, as you can see, it's nice and thick now. And it's smooth, and you want to look at it. If corn looks fairly translucent, then it's been cooked. And you don't want to scorch it. Always turn the heat down as it thickens, because if you leave it at that high heat, I don't think you can keep up with the stirring to keep it from burning. So at this point, I'm going to add the sausage. Now, since I made a smaller batch for the home kitchen, we may not need the whole pound. But your sausage sometimes has more fat, and when you drain it off, you get very little meat left. Okay, when we mix it in, it doesn't really look really pretty, but the taste is amazing. And it's also personal preference. If you like a lot more meat in it, you can always add more. That looks about right. I might add just a little more to that. As you can see, I got some left over, but you can make sausage gravy out of the leftovers. I don't know how sausage gravy over top of Krepples would be, because I've always had it only with syrup or plain. However, you can try it. You may like it. Okay, we want to heat that through good, because the sausage has cooled off. I want to make sure it's hot for this process. You can see there's some spices and herbs in there. I try to get as plain a sausage as possible, because I find that some of the seasonings just kind of don't go with it. Anyway, that looks done. And now I'm going to pour it into the pan. So let me turn the heat off and readjust everything here. Show you the pan. I have lately been using parchment in my pans. I just really like how things come out of the pan a lot neater with the parchment. It's not absolutely necessary, but doing this in a modern kitchen, we might as well use some modern methods. Hey, all right, give me a moment and we'll be back. Okay, as you see, I put parchment and had to hold it on there. You set it in the pan a little ahead and leave it like that, it stays in better. So now, make sure your handles aren't too hot to handle. We're going to pour that in there, if I can get it where the camera can see it. Notice how thick it is. If you leave the sausage out, you've got fried mush makings. The only difference is the sausage. You cook it the same, about the same ratio of cornmeal to water. And fried mush is, don't get much better than that. Here we go. Alright. Smooth it out a bit. Alright, like I said, it's not a real pretty dish. It's all about the flavor. Anyhow, we're going to let this cool, then we're going to put it in the refrigerator. And it's best to let it sit at least a day. However, you might be able to get it out a little sooner. The problem is, if you slice it too soon, even if it is cold, the slices tend to not stay together. There's just too much moisture still in it. What you want is to they kind of look like bread slices, only they're mush. And the water content can be a problem when we go to fry it, and I will address that when I demonstrate the frying. It is dangerous still for little kids or pets, or even you, if you're not careful. try to get the mush off the edges, because if that dries on there, it is really hard to scrape off. Anyhow, see you when we're ready to fry.